If you think storytelling is just entertainment, think again. Stories are how we lead, inspire, and build real connection, the backbone of every thriving community. Today's guest on Talk About Your Community is Victoria Carrington Chávez, an award-winning entrepreneur, TEDx speaker, and branding bandita at the Story Saloon. She's helped creators and thought leaders unlock their voices, show up with clarity, and build brands that resonate, with features on Telemundo, Fierce by Me Too, and more. Victoria believes your story isn't just optional, it is absolutely essential. She teaches how to share your story to spark courage, creativity, and hope. So let's go ahead and get started. Kalisa, roll the opening credits. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you happen to be. You've tuned in to Talk About Your Community, the show about building better communities, whether in person, online, or my favorite, the ones that take advantage of both. I am so glad you're here today on this live show. I've got with me a guest that I'm very excited about, Victoria Carrington Chávez. We're going to bring her on in just a moment here. But for those of you tuning in for the first time, this is a live interactive show. We ask for your comments, your ideas, your responses, and your questions throughout the show, and we may end up promoting them onto the screen as we go. So I'm very grateful that you're here. We had a wonderful sign up for the show today. Over 60 people said they were going to drop by and check it out. And it seems to have been the trend this year. We've had some really great guests on, Victoria being no exception to that rule, and really eager to jump into some of the questions and commentary from the chat here today. So really glad you're here. And just by way of housekeeping, first of all, we stream live on LinkedIn as well as up on YouTube and occasionally on Instagram. The thing that I would ask of you, if you are so inclined, if you like this show, if you like this content, we've got the full back catalog, both on the Clocktower Advisors LinkedIn page, as well as on YouTube. On the Clocktower Advisors channel. You can go ahead and subscribe to those. Love getting comments there, likes, and shares if you like what's here. Then also, if you are the sort of person that doesn't really love to listen in through the full video of a show, we also have a podcast version of this, and so we'll look for you to join us up on your favorite podcasting devices and apps. So that being said, we do usually do these shows every 2 weeks. We're not going to have one in 2 weeks from now, but we will be dropping an episode, which I'm very excited about, which we'll be posting up in the Clocktower Advisors channel shortly. But our next live show is going to be Friday, November the 7th. Going to be having Sarah Hempel, who's the Senior Community Manager, Senior Community Experience Manager at Blanchard, talking about building community from the heart, which I think is going to go really well as a companion piece to the conversation here today with Victoria. And speaking of Victoria, I'm going to bring her on stage here today. Victoria, welcome to the show. Great to see you. Oh, I think you're on mute there for a second.
Unmuting yourself is the first step anytime you're going to speak or share your story. Hi, Todd. Thank you so much for having me here on the show this morning. It's an honor to be here.
Ever since we had our first conversation, maybe about a month or so ago, I just knew you're going to be an amazing guest as a storyteller and as a human, and as someone who has a lot to say about how we go about bringing ourselves to the world. I think those insights are so readily available and important to the act of building better communities that this is just essential weightlifting for anybody that's trying to organize, these kinds of places where people can gather in safety to share about themselves, to share their narratives, and to be better people. So I've been looking forward to this show all week.
Yay! Yes, me too. I'm so excited, and it means a lot to be able to. One big dream I had is that I could continue to work from anywhere. jumping into a story, and I don't think I've actually ever shared this story publicly, but I used to travel by train a lot. My dad loves trains, so anytime we would do travel, we would either do road trip or we would do trains, unless it was international. But I remember meeting a guy on the train when I was probably a teenager, probably like 14, and he was like, "Oh, I'm working," and I was like, "Wait, you're traveling, like, and you're working?" And I remember saying, I want to do that someday. So I just feel really excited. And I do. I actually am in the middle of my own cross country road trip right now and feeling excited when I get to take these stops and have really great conversations with people like yourself, especially about community. Because I have met people in every stop that I've either worked with. Some people, I was just in New York with people that I met through LinkedIn. LinkedIn was the first place that I met them. So you can absolutely build your community virtually and worldwide, which is really amazing thing that social media lets us do.
That is so powerful. I love that idea. Your cross-country trip right now, are you traveling by train now, or is that?
I've upgraded to a car. I'm not
Okay.
traveling, but I mean, I think that that's one of those, like, when I retire
Oh yeah.
dreams to just take the train. My dad does that, and he's really excited to just be like, "Oh yeah, I'll take the train. I have 10 days to travel," but I'm doing it by car right now.
There's something wonderfully unhurried about a
Mhm.
train transit. I used to travel via Milwaukee to Chicago on the Hiawatha on Amtrak for
Yes.
many years, and I enjoyed working on the train. I enjoyed the occasional people that you meet there, interacting with the conductors. It just felt so civilized.
Yes. I mean, I choose. So I spent some of my childhood years in Minnesota, and I was born and raised in Colorado. So we would take the Amtrak from Minnesota to Colorado. We used to stop often, and it was usually for Christmas time. We used to stop in Chicago, and I remember being like, "I'm not getting off of the train in Chicago. It's way too cold there," and that's from Minnesota.
Oh
So
yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. I mean, I said a few words of introduction to you that were probably just insultingly brief about your career and what you've done, and like the time you spent on the stage at TEDx, telling your personal story and about. I love the story about your mom. Maybe you would maybe share that briefly, and the boxes story. That one's so powerful. Yeah, would you maybe kind of share a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I have loved stories since I was a kid. I loved cartoons. I drew. I loved watching movies. Actually, Star Wars is one of my dad's favorite movies. So from a young age, I was very versed in the lore of an epic story. And there's this saying that I use a lot in my cowork called main character energy and in my work. And it is this belief that we are not just the main characters in our story, but we're the authors. And so the whole premise, it kind of came from TikTok, is just, falling in love with your life. And so for me, becoming a founder has allowed me to fall in love with my life. And becoming somebody who travels, who speaks, I fall in love with my life, but I really fall in love with people and their stories. Because you mentioned the train. And so you get to kind of hear where people are from and a little bit of their background. And so a bit of background of me, as you alluded, and that led me to the TEDx. So as you alluded, so I grew up in Colorado, as I said, and I'm multicultural. And so my mom, when I was young, I got called into the principal's office, which of course is really scary when you're like 8 years old.
It's
And they called, yeah,
terrifying.
like, what did I do? Am I in trouble? And they called me into the office because my mom had not filled out the race and ethnicity paperwork. And they had said that I wasn't allowed to continue to go to school or go to class until she corrected this. And my mom comes into the office and clear as day says she made no mistake. She intentionally left that form blank. And because she said, my daughter doesn't fit into a box. And I was really excited and I feel really grateful to have a mother that was so supportive of my multitudes, my multiculturalism. I think that a lot of times we feel like we have to fit into one box or fit into the narrative that somebody else gives us. And in that moment, my mom was like, no, she's not fitting in one box. She's allowed to define herself in the ways that she sees fit. And this form doesn't really define her. And so she let them know she would not fill out the form. She let them know that I would be going back to class, and she would not be coming back to deal with this. And the school kind of gave her some pushback, and I encourage you to watch the TEDx because it was really powerful to tell this story from the stage and also have a picture of like 8-year-old me, missing teeth. I think I'm missing a few in there. And it really reminded me of the power of the story because I'm talking about this passion that my mom had in defending me, her daughter. And I just, in that moment when I was telling it from the stage, I felt like everybody was my mom. Like there was this gasp and there was this, how do we defend and care for this child? How do we create space for this child to be who she is? And I think that that's how stories connect to the power of community. You tell a story that has emotional connection, that connects all of us through this human experience we're all having, and suddenly we're all bound for the same greater cause.
That's amazing. I love that so much. And and I would definitely underscore that people should check out your TEDx talk because it was very powerful and really good to watch. We're talking to Victoria Carrington Chávez, storyteller extraordinaire, on the show here today. If you just tuned in, just a couple of quick shout outs for some guests who just put some comments up in the chat here. Lucy says, branding bandita, love that. I don't know if Lucy's a friend of yours, new face to me on the show, but love.
She is like a reina de dinero. I was on her podcast talking about how to build generational wealth for first gen. So wonderful. It's really amazing to see the community. Once again, somebody that I've met through LinkedIn and sharing stories.
Wonderful. And then there were two other quick comments here. I'll just put them up on the screen. Unfortunately, due to the vicissitudes and disagreements between StreamYard and LinkedIn, I can't see the names of the people who actually said these things. So my apologies for that. But someone's been very excited about this for several days. Really wonderful to see. And then someone else commented, Star Wars leaned way into the hero's journey archetype. We can talk about that.
Yes. And I love that there was the reference of the hero's journey archetype because a lot of the work that I do with people is around the hero's journey. But understanding before you take a journey, you need to understand who you are and who you want to become. And yes, I love Star Wars is one of those epic tales. I think we think of Fellowship, Lord of the Rings, another one as these, and Marvel, all these epic tales that really follow the hero's journey.
I definitely want to get into that, talking about Joseph Campbell, the hero of 1,000 faces, all of the goodness that's involved around that. And maybe even ask you a challenging question or two around that as well, if you're up for it. I wanted to maybe just kind of come back to some of the basics that we promised that we would talk about, during the episode today. The first one is leading with your story. And what that means, and then stories that inspire, human stories, and then building genuine connection. I think these are all related, sorts of topics. So it's not a matter of taking one at a time. We'll probably tackle them all at once here, but I'm intrigued by that notion of leading with your story. Like, you come into a room, you're meeting a group of strangers. How do you lead with your story? What does that actually mean as you're advising your clients and how you bring yourself, to places?
Yeah, I mean, your story is your great differentiator because nobody can do what you do the way that you do it. And what I mean by that is, so I was recently in New York and there's a ton of pizza places, right? But each one has their own story. And you walk into some of them and it's like, this pizza place has been in my family for, 50 years. It's my grandma's recipe. It's things like that, because when I walk in and I hear that story of like, this is the same pizza that my grandma made me when I was a kid, it makes me go, yeah, I want to be a part of that. So I think that we, as founders, as entrepreneurs, as thought leaders, we can, especially in social media, get caught up in the, well, so and so is doing it this way, or I see this person. How do I be more like this person? Instead of how do I be more like me and be more clear in who I am so that I can lead with that. So then when I'm at a networking event and you're getting all these different business cards, you can say not what you do, you can say why you do it or who you do it for or why it's important to you. Because you, Todd, you've been at the networking event for like the 10 plus hours and you've met so many people. And if we really sit back and we think of what makes somebody memorable is stories, is because our brains are wired for them. Our brains don't remember data in the same way they remember stories. Our brains can recall a story. So if you tell me that your grandmother made you this pizza, I'm going to remember that. Even if I don't remember your name, I'm going to say, that's Grandma Pizza Guy.
Right, exactly. I love that. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a lesson I try to think about with community building, and those of us who strategize, build, manage spaces online, there's I think a somewhat more unique challenge for us when we're in a virtual environment, because we don't we're limited to what we're expressing in text most of the time with that. So I miss the context of the nuance of your facial expression or how you fill up a room with your energy. To not to get too woo about it, but just sort of like all of the cues that consciously and unconsciously we pick up by being in the same physical space as someone else. We lack some of those advantages in virtual spaces. And so, those of us that are trying to convene virtual spaces where there is that sense of connection and immediacy requires us to tell stories in a way that explain like why we're here. And I think sometimes, like, especially I think with corporate online communities, there's a sense of established distance that organizations will try to maintain because, well, we're being professional and we don't want to open ourselves up to lawsuits or anything like that. But I maintain that to be an effective community builder, you need to bring yourself to that space. And to express, as you said very, very wonderfully, like why you're here. And that's a matter of maybe telling a good story about like what your stake in the game is.
Yeah, it's the why. Like, running a community, being a founder, being a corporate leader, all of those are hard work. Like there's no way around that. And, we choose our hard, but also why are we choosing our hard? I think that leading with your story is remembering that. Why are you choosing the hard? Because it's the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning. It's the thing that says, I'm going to keep going when it's challenging. But then that's the thing that reminds people that you're human. And especially in a day and age of a lot of AI, people are salivating and wanting more human connection. And stories are a place that say, I'm not AI, that this is the genuineness. Even if you're using those tools to amplify your story, like, unless you tell AI that there's the grandma's recipe, it's not going to know those things. It just models the things that you tell it. So I really believe that leading with your story is going back to that why. And your why is what's connected to your values. And we think about when people want to join your community, it's about values. When people, like, it's the value alignment. And what's beautiful is that's the thing that is outside the box. You can have people from a lot of different walks of life, but if their values are aligned, if their causes, if their beliefs, if their common goals are aligned, you can create a really diverse and abundant community. And so our whys really help give it a key indicator into someone's values?
I love the wisdom in that. And I think that, for me, where the rubber meets the road is, how we talk about those communities we belong to, especially as community managers, as conveners of those spaces. We need to be really transparent about how and why we're in those spaces ourselves. One of my favorite stories of a community that I have been passionate about is one that helps people who try to quit smoking or vaping.
Mm-hmm.
I first worked with them some years ago, and have had some more recent work, with the organization. And for me, my why of working with them is twofold. One is that my dad was a smoker for many years, and he quit whenever I came along. But that had an impact on him. He ended up dying of heart failure. And I think he lived a long life. But by the same token, my involvement with this community has been underscored by my desire to remember and honor him. And he had the ability to quit. He said he'd still dreamed of stowing cigarettes in the house from place to place because of it. But so for me, like the struggle of people that are trying to quit, like that was very real for me. And the second piece of it was just in the course of talking to people who belong to that space and trying to understand why they would return to it and felt value in it, was that unlike any other online community I had worked with, they said, well, I'm alive today because of this space. My spouse didn't understand, my desire to quit. My friends and families didn't. In fact, they were putting me in peer pressure situations where I felt like I had to smoke. But instead, I chose not to. I chose to come here, and this is what gave me the strength to do it. I mean, so like having those kinds of stories that really intensely point to, I think, very genuine reasons for wanting to lead in a community, and not lead by saying like follow me, I'm the leader, but like I'm leading by trying to show you like, how I relate to this. How do you relate to this as well? Like I think our stories, do they? Do you feel like there's a propagation? Like do my stories lead to other stories that in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, stories, they kind of feel like the nesting dolls. Like they can lead to so much more depth. I sometimes I have a client who refers to me as her story weaver, because she's like, I feel like it's like this beautiful tapestry of how it's all connected, all of these different threads of stories, and they can create a bigger picture. And it depends on the perspective you're looking at it, which I also like to embroider. So I felt like that was such an aligned piece. But to answer your question, yes, the stories can lead to other stories. But what really stands out about a leader, and I know LinkedIn uses this word a lot, of like that authority, right? To become authority or just an expert in your field. And when we share stories like you just did, like our experience is our expertise, right? You're telling me you're leading this community about quitting smoking, and you've told two stories that say that I am an expert in this because of my experience with this. I have passion, I have care, I have understanding. And when we think about what makes communities stronger and healthier, is people want to be heard and people want to be seen. And stories cut through all of the other kind of filler words, that people can suddenly be seen and heard and therefore supported in ways faster than anything else. Because by people hearing that story, they go, wait, of course Todd is going to care about me quitting smoking, because it means something to Todd because of his own experience. And so sometimes I see this in the field of like storytelling as being this like kind of nice to have, like from corporate, right? Instead of it being like the powerful thing that it is, that connects people quicker, because your experience, that story is your authority, is your thought leadership.
I love that. Yeah, it's authority, and it's emotional connection, and can be release. It can be cathartic as well.
Yeah. And it lends itself to marketing in that people buy because of how they feel. Buying is a psychological thing. That's why there is so much manipulation out there in marketing, and why sometimes people are like, I don't like marketing. And a good friend of mine, Chelsea, the marketing psychologist, talks a lot about ethical and non-manipulative marketing, because the thing is both of those sides deal with emotions. It's what are you doing with those emotions? Are you using that emotional resonance we have as humans to connect with other people, to uplift other people, to amplify, and to help people feel like seen and supported and be better, right? And your story, I'm actually going to share this public. So I quit smoking. It's probably been like 19 years now since I've quit smoking, or I'm sorry, 17. And I recently just posted to LinkedIn that I'm 18 years sober, which I was so ashamed of that. But this year I felt like, you know what, I'm going to post it. And I got messages from people that I hadn't even met that kind of came into the DM and said, thank you so much for sharing and being honest and sharing your journey. It really resonated with me, and I feel not alone in this. And I think that that's the other piece, is that professional and perfection are not the goal. You can be professional and you can still be imperfect and human. I think when we actually lean into some of those sides of our stories, we show people that we can connect with them and be stronger leaders because we see them. We're not going to judge them. We're not going to be like, I'm better than you. We're going to say, I've been there and I can guide you through it.
I love that. So if you maybe just happen to drop in on the channel here and are catching us midstream, I'm talking to Victoria Carrington Chávez, storyteller and wonderful human all the way around. I am so honored to have you on the show. For our guests who are in the chat here, if you got a question for Victoria, please pop it in. We'd love to hear from you, any of your ideas or thoughts or what your story has been so far. Victoria, you've got a Substack where you've been doing some writing lately. I saw your latest one on Clark Kent versus Superman. Who's your real alter ego? Really interesting the way this is hitting me, and this is going to get into our conversation, I think, about Joseph Campbell here. But the Superman movie has come up for me like just yesterday with another past guest of the show, Dr. Ruth Diaz. And she's a little critical of the idea of the savior superhero, type, and wrote a really interesting, I think, provocative in a good way, post saying like this is a character that's maybe problematic and needs to be undone, and this idea of the hero's journey is maybe psychologically bad for us in some ways. So like I'm always interested in sort of nipping at the edges or the opposite side of a narrative. And I'm always kind of putting one thing against the other. So like the idea of the hero's journey versus, I'm going to borrow something from another guest we had on, the pilgrim's journey. Sahana Chattopadhyay, who I consider a philosopher of community building and organic, decolonialized, thinking about, how society is structured. You didn't know we were going to get this deep, did you? But there is some kind of tension here. There's a dialectic that's here, and like you, I grew up reading comics and loving, superhero shows, cartoon shows, all of that. So, like, I like to think that I come at it as an adult with like open eyes around the problems of these characters. Superman, yes, he's an alien, and that touches into all kinds of immigration, kinds of things. But these are multi-layered, complex characters. Like the superheroes that we have are really trilogies of our age that we have now. And you were making some points about him as being like, is he Clark Kent or is he Superman? And how do you see yourself, in that role? I think the points you were making there were really, really interesting as well. And I'm blathering now, so I'm going to stop. But I'd love to hear like any reflections or reactions, that you've got to the general topic here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, so I too, so Joseph Campbell's hero's journey is one aspect. I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like, not to get too woo, as you say, but also a little woo, is that I feel like we're meant to do more than just, you know, pay bills and die. And so like there is purpose, there's reasonings why we're here, there's reasonings why we resonate with the things that we do or align with the things that we do or value what we do. And I think that the hero's journey or the pilgrimage or any sort of journey, the journey allows us to explore that why, right? And I mean, I for one, I love the stars, so I'll look up at the night sky and I'm in awe. You know, other people might sit by the ocean and be awestruck, but understanding, okay, that awe moment, there's a reason why I feel that, and I'm going to go on a journey, whether that's physical, spiritual, emotional, to understand more about that. And because I think of it in cycles. We go through different seasons and cycles in our life. And so I've in storytelling, I've kind of found a lot of different aspects of which journey resonates with people. I actually really like the heroine's journey myself, a little bit more refined in how I connect. But at the end of the day, it's about knowing who you are. And it kind of, that's where I'll tap into the Clark Kent and the alter ego question. And because I felt like Superman was always hiding who he was. And I get that because I too was taught to hide parts of who I am. And I think that there's generations of trauma that I've had to look at from my family of hiding who I am just to be safe. But then how do you navigate that? But then how do you still show up and do the thing that you feel called to do? I think that that's a conflict that Superman feels like. I want to hide who I am to be safe, but how do I still follow the hero's calling? Or we can call our hero's calling our purpose. I mean, we all, when we were kids, had big dreams. I want to be a cowgirl. Um, so what's the thing you wanted to be? And if you're not there, ask yourself why. I mean, at the end of the day, the hero's journey is a great big why.
That's really powerful. I love that. And um, as I think about the Clark Kent Superman thing, I'll get a little nerdy with you here about this. So it's interesting. So like, I think in your article you make this point that Clark Kent is kind of the disguise, or yeah. So that's so that he can be human passing.
Yeah.
That he wears the glasses, he adopts the nerdy persona so that he's not threatening to anybody, that he's a mild-mannered reporter,
Yep.
Clark Kent. Um, I can't help but kind of flip that around to think about a character like Batman, who, like in I think more recent stories, like some of the common wisdom about that character is actually Batman is the real person, and Bruce is Bruce is also a covering of some sort, that he's a persona that was constructed. Like, all that was left of young Bruce when he lost his parents was this Batman persona,
Yeah.
and that was all that was there. And that was his truth, for it as well. So, yeah. Anyways, I love I love talking comics, and I think that idea of like being the person that you need to be in the world, like sometimes the idea of those heroes helps us. Grant Morrison wrote a book called Super Gods, where he talks about sort of the history of comics. Really interesting story about the archetypes and all of that. And he said, like, the story of Superman for him, his parents he grew up in Scotland, by the U.S. Nuclear bases, by the subs, and his parents were protesters. And he grew up with all these magazines in the house about like how the bomb was going to destroy us all. He liked the nuclear bomb, and he said he was terrified of that until he came across, these GI comics that were left behind, like the Superman comics.
Mm-hmm.
He said finally there was an idea that was stronger than the bomb.
I love that. And so I love superheroes and archetypes, as anybody who listens to me long enough can tell. And it's so intriguing to me of like Superman standing for what you just said. I mean, Superman is, the archetype is about hope. Like that character is about hope, and how hope is super powerful. And we can see those that show up in different, I mean, we referred to Star Wars earlier. I mean, hope is an incredibly powerful force. And when we move into those ideas, and a lot of the work that I do with clients in this, like, in psychological fashion, is what is that idea that is so hopeful that you can hold on to, much like the story that you're saying of like, that's bigger than whatever the fear, the worry, the anxiety is. And kind of in your note about Batman, Batman being about justice. And I think sometimes Batman being that representation of what is that justice that we want to see in the world. Because Batman is he's a little bit more, they're all complex in a way, but Batman's like got some serious trauma, like, and he's really trying to like figure it out. And to some, he's the villain. And or what he's doing is so radical. And I love this idea that you talk about. And that's kind of what I talk about too, is like, who is the real one? And they both, like, we start to realize we're both kind of, we can ask ourselves the same thing of our own personas, like, who is the more me? And we hear that a lot, right? Like, be more authentic, be you. Well, which character, which archetype are you taking up in a certain space? And they're all you. It's much like my mom being like, hey, my daughter doesn't fit into a box. Like, we're not one-sided. Like humans, we're very complex. We're very multidimensional, and like we're multitudes. And so I think that that's what's so fun about these stories, is seeing these characters mirror our complexity. And to kind of geek out about another. So Wonder Woman is one of my favorite characters, has been since I was a kid. I had a Wonder Woman poster, folder, like I had a Trapper Keeper. If you're old enough to know what a Trapper Keeper is, like,
unfortunately I am, yes.
And what I love about her is, I mean, her archetype represents truth and the power of truth. And also kind of, she went about it differently. She was like, I guess I'll be mild-mannered. I guess I have to fit in. But she was a little bit more hesitant than Batman was to be Diana Prince. She was more like, no, Wonder Woman's who I am. Like, this is just this is my day job. And I think that so many of us, and a lot of the people that I work with, I view it as like, you're kind of hiding in your greatness. You're Wonder Woman, you're Superman, and you're like, this is my day job that I'm doing. And you're not, you're not answering the call. And I think that so much of going back to the journey is about, I hear the call, how do I answer it? And that's where community, that's where consulting, coaching, guiding, all of those things, like therapy, all of those different supports, is because you can't answer that call by yourself, even though it's introspective. You really need other people to like help you, which I, lead into the Avengers when I talk about a team.
Yeah. I was going to ask about that. I love the idea of sort of the ensemble team. That's become a very popular concept, that whether it's the Avengers or the Justice League or the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen or the
Yes.
I am that nerd.
Same. I am also that nerd.
But I mean, sort of like the idea of every one of them is a hero, but they come together and their unique talents are what shine, and they get to be their true selves. Only insofar as they're part of the group and helping to achieve great things. And that's a very community-oriented message. I've always found that powerful.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I mean, community is such a key thing. Like, it's what makes a story more interesting. And like, I also think it's really interesting to kind of see these personas and personalities and how they work in a team. And I mean, anybody who's been in any sort of like corporate marketing or corporate setting, like we're all figuring out how to work together in a team. And the leaders are the ones who allow that space to expand, allow things to, you know, be refined. It's not perfect. Sometimes it's kind of messy. And I think that that's why these stories are so intriguing, because they mirror how we might be feeling. And I think a lot about you said like the Avengers League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is also a really, really good, like, because there's I learned about this in one of my recreation management courses. That's actually what I used to do before guiding people through stories. I would guide people through the woods in Colorado. And there was always, we talked about the stormin, which is where everybody's kind of conflicting and fighting. And then they kind of figure it all out. And I love that in this reminder of like, community isn't for all of us to be exactly alike. It's actually meant for us to have different experiences, to come from different walks of life, and then to kind of like through conflict and, as I said in my TED talk, difficult conversations, find what is our common ground so that we can connect, so that we can build something stronger, a community of people that are all the same is not as interesting and as in depth as one that is full of a lot of different varieties of people.
Amen to that. Yeah, I think you know there's so much truth in variety is the spice of life. You know that
Yes.
like it's an interesting tension, because as we talk about community building, we always talk about sort of shared purpose and meaning for a space, a sense of shared values in some sense. But that doesn't mean everybody's the same, because if everybody has exactly the same feelings about a topic or a cause or an approach to life or a profession, that's a pretty boring space to be in, right? There's like nothing to talk about because we agree about everything, right? And so while we have to say like, you know, the edges of this picture are, you know, is the purpose and sort of the shared values, but there's a lot of space in the middle of that picture to kind of talk about sort of where you stand and where you stand and where you stand.
Yeah, it's space to explore. And seeing one of the comments, someone had wrote Superman is somewhat problematic superhero because he's effectively immortal, and that there is not the same risk for him as the other superheroes. And I can agree to that to some degree. One of my favorite archetypes is Steve Rogers, Captain America. And I know that there's a lot of reason, but what I love about Steve Rogers is like, he essentially is given the superhero serum because of his heart, because of his leadership. I mean, he is in the Avengers, he's the de facto leader. And honestly, he's not the strongest Avenger. He's not the brightest Avenger. But he is the one with the strongest heart. And he is the one that says, hey, I'm going to root for you. I'm going to cheer for you. We're going to figure out these difficulties. And I mean, and through his arc, he has his own problems. Every single hero is flawed. And just like every person is flawed. And so I think about that in terms of like leading a community also means being willing to like risk and trust, and even put your faith in people that you might not see eye to eye with. I mean, because Steve and Tony are always fighting, right? But at the end of the day, like they'll come together to get things done.
I love that observation. I think that's so key, and yeah, Steve Rogers is a great example of that. All the quote unquote normal human superheroes are always quite interesting to me because of their vulnerability and sort of what they have. But you know, yeah, Steve Rogers is an interesting one. Quick shout out, my friend Amadou Diallo. griot and storyteller, past guest on the show.
Yes.
I want to put the two of you together. You guys have a lot to talk about.
That would be great.
It says community is communion in our contrast, Victoria. That's a lovely thought. And then someone also said they like the quote, community isn't because we're all alike. Wonderful.
Community is communion. I love that. I love that.
So, man, the time is rapidly going by here. Before we wrap up the show, I wanted to mention, so your company is Lilac and Aspen. I wanted to ask about the name because there's always a story behind a name. And also about one of the key activities that you engage in, something called the Story Saloon. I'd love, for people on the show to hear a little bit about both of those.
Yeah, so Lilac Aspen, so my business started out as an art business. I have a background in graphic design, so visual storytelling is also something I can do really well. And so when I started my business, Lilac and Aspen is a note to the two places that I've called home for the last 10 years. I've gone between New England and Colorado. And with that, I've realized I've kind of gone back and forth. This Boston to Colorado cross-country road trip I've been on it's not my first rodeo, which then leads me into the Story Saloon of I wanted to build a brand that really spoke to how much I love stories, especially as I moved more into story guiding and being a narrative strategist and creative strategist for brands and amazing people. And what had happened was I got this nickname as the branding bandita. It kind of was the marketing bandita, the branding bandita. But what somebody said is, I feel like you are such a kind of trailblazer and you're making your own rules. And much like a good artist, you know the rules enough so that you can break them.
Yes.
And I had found that I work with a lot of people who do not fit in the box, creative entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and founders. A lot of woo-preneurs, as I like to say, who would tell me, A, they did not like marketing, and B, they felt like traditional marketing or bro marketing, as sometimes it's referred to, didn't align with them. And I found storytelling was the way that connected with everybody. So I thought, where's a place where we can gather to tell stories? Well, in the Old West, where do you go? You go to a saloon. And it's funny that I took one of those really random Facebook quizzes probably 7 years ago. And it said, in the Old West, what would be your role? I love the Old West. Actually, a deeper story. My dad loves John Wayne movies, so I grew up watching them. McClintock was one of my favorites. Growing up in Colorado, we loved road trips and camping, and so spent a lot of time in what places that felt like the Old West. So I took this survey once that said, what would your job title be in the Old West? And this was 7 years ago. This was well before the Story Saloon. And it said saloon owner. And I just laughed today because that's how people who work with me or come into the community of the Story Saloon, they're just I feel like you're just a great saloon owner and bartender. And listen, the irony of that, I'm sober isn't lost on me. But I think that I've created a space where people can be seen, they can be celebrated, they can have a good time. And it's all about the feelings. There's so many different ways of how that looks for people. And the Story Saloon and an Old West bar is how it looks and feels for me. Also, I look good in a hat. Sometimes I wear the hat on the show, but I didn't have it today.
That is fantastic. Now, wait, the show, is that like a Zoom that you run, or is it a live stream? Where could somebody tune into that?
Yeah, so I don't have an official live stream yet, but if you follow the Substack, that's usually where I'll be dropping video content in 2026, and then telling stories, especially of my road trip, because I'm in the middle of going from Boston to, actually, I think I will spill the tea with you. You get the fresh tea. I posted today to LinkedIn that I'm moving, and I am moving to California. So I am currently in between those two states right now. So yeah, people can follow the Story Saloon and get into the community, as well as I have expert-led workshops where people come and kind of teach you how to, tell your story, but also how to effectively and efficiently build your community or your business.
So great. I hope people on the stream will take you up on that. I love the metaphor of the saloon. I think that's so great because it's sort of the casual atmosphere, the tendency for people to tell their bartender everything,
Yes.
and I like how it is the story that I come in and tell you today in the saloon is maybe not the story that I'm going to tell you a week from now. When I come in. And so that idea about, I think it respects our evolving selves and how our stories are evolving over time, and how, I think, as you alluded earlier, like we're influenced by a multitude of different personas or ways of being. And that's always kind of developing in us. And so having a saloon or a community is a place to come in and explore some of those different versions of ourselves, as we go. So, so powerful, so powerful.
Yes. Yeah. I'm excited. Yeah. I wanted to create a safe space for people to explore because, like you said, we evolve, we change, have fun, be celebrated. I think that that's a big thing that we don't always, celebrate ourselves enough. Especially, I know that was something, because it is a space. I think that part of why I wrote about Superman is and hiding is because I felt like I hid for so long. And now letting more people see my greatness gives permission for other people to be in their greatness. And I mean, it's like the stars. I mean, if one star shined, or all the stars shined at the same radiance, it wouldn't be as interesting. So having all of that brilliance really creates space for that expansion.
I think that there's no more beautiful note to end on today than that. Victoria, thank you so much for having this space with me on the show. This has been very meaningful for me, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing. I hope that people take the opportunity to follow you on LinkedIn and on your Substack, and maybe participate in an upcoming Story Saloon. Thank you for doing great work and bringing your story to the world.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to everybody who made the show possible and all the comments. And I appreciate you all. And go be the main characters that we're born to be.
Fantastic. For those of you who stuck with us through the whole show, or if you're catching this on a replay, would love to hear from you. I try to respond to each and every comment that shows up in LinkedIn or on YouTube. And so if you would, please go ahead and subscribe or comment if it is in your heart to do so. I really appreciate that. And in the meantime, I hope that you take some time for yourself this weekend. Take some time away, get away from the screen, get out in the fresh air, breathe it in, look at the sky, smile at the stars, and we will be back here in a couple of weeks on November the 7th for our next live show. In the meantime, please keep building great communities. Kalisa, let's roll the closing credits.